Hello, everybody. I am Prakriti Manyar from Purple Pencil Project, a website for Indian literature. Today, I'm in conversation with artist RC Friedericks, or Rishi, on behalf of Niyogi Books, with whom he has just published his first novel, The Windhorse Warrior, in 2018. It's a historical fiction set in Tibet of the 1950s. I want to actually start by reading the blurb of Windhorse Warrior because I feel like it really gives the readers an understanding or like this big picture of what the book offers. So the Windhorse Warrior offers an inside look at the struggles and aspirations of Tibetan people during the 1950s. It is a tale that weaves together the politics of occupation and resistance, an otherworldly romance between a Chinese communist and an educated Tibetan woman, and the soaring vision of the Tibetan spiritual heart. Chuang Wei Ming, I hope I'm getting his pronunciation right, a young zealot from Shanghai, arrives in Lithang on the eastern Tibetan plateau with a mission to prepare the people for Maoism, but soon outgrows its limiting worldview. Chuang falls in love with the beautiful and intelligent Dechen, who introduces him to the richness of Tibetan Buddhism. Palden Rinpoche, is that correct?
Rinpoche.
Rinpoche. Dechen's spiritual teacher includes Shuang in their plan for a general spiritual awakening, based on the legend of King Gesar of Ling. Together, they pursue a pure communism infused with Buddhist teachings to create an enlightened society. So there's just so much happening, right? And I want to begin by asking you about your own connection with Tibet, Tibetan spiritualism, communism, China, and just this general broader field that the work is situated in.
Well, I grew up in Asia. My father was a doctor, and he started a hospital in Nepal. But when I was very young, he was first in China, and we had to leave China when Maoism took over. So we were there from 1947 to about 1950, and then from there we went to India, and at that time Nepal was just opening up to foreigners like us, and my father went and started a hospital in Nepal, and I went to boarding in Missouri at Woodstock School. So my background is both connected with China and with India. And in the late 60s, we began seeing refugees coming through Nepal. And some of them needed treatment at my father's hospital. So that's my first contact with them in late 1958, 59, in that time period, when the communists were starting to take over Tibet. And then the Dalai Lama, of course, came in 1959 out of Tibet, and his first residence was in Missouri. And he came to Woodstock School in just a few months after he came out of Tibet. And through an interpreter, he came to our school and gave us a short address about everything. And since then, I've been fascinated with the Dalai Lama. So that's basically been my connection. And later, I lived in Nepal as an adult, and I met many of these Tibetan refugees and heard their stories. And I felt I just needed to explain their situation to the world. And I chose to do this through story rather than through, a nonfiction book.
Yeah, that's actually what you said in the end really sets me up for my second question, which I wanted to ask was that it's more about the craft of writing, right? You take something that you've experienced both firsthand a little bit, secondhand, you've met people who've experienced these stories. There's a philosophy that you believe in. How do you take so much of like life and turn it into like historical fiction? And sort of why A, that, and B, like why in 2018? So how did that journey as a writer, as a as a fiction writer, come about?
Oh boy, that's a big topic. I think I've always been drawn to stories more than nonfiction. I remember writing stories as a child, not very good stories, but nonetheless something. And I actually started writing this novel back in 1990 after I'd met some of the people who told me their stories, and so I wanted to do that somehow. And then I do a lot of thinking through writing anyway. I've been doing journals and things like that all my life. So writing became a process of defining my own views on things and my own philosophy. So, and combining it with story just seemed a natural thing for me to do. Part of the experience was actually going to Tibet a number of times, just to that area where I wrote about. So I was able to kind of take into my soul, you might say, the landscape, as well as what the people had been through. And so from that kind of personal experience, I was able to write the story.
And does the approach to sort of the philosophies in the story change depending on genre, like journal being personal, nonfiction? Does that change how you think about something?
No, I'm not sure how to answer that question.
No problem. This is just me being very, very curious about the craft. Let's narrow it down to the book itself. Speaking of the Windhorse Warrior, the epigraph at the start of your book is by Charles Eisenstein. And it seems really so relevant today. I'll probably put this epigraph in the caption later for our readers. Concepts of expanding oneself to accommodate others, loving more, being more compassionate, thinking about healing, really seem like the need of the day. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the pandemic that we're in the process of being in right now has kind of revealed the polarities and the separation that we all have. It just kind of underscored the state of our civilization in so many ways. And the need for connection and cooperation and compassion is just so obvious to many of us anyway. And so with these awarenesses of the political, religious, and racial divides between us, and then the pace of our so-called progress, as with technology and everything, we've reached a kind of endpoint in our civilization. We've got to change it or be destroyed, basically. It's, either through all the violence against each other, or the climate's going to do it for us, one way or the other. So we've got to make some drastic changes. And as Charles Eisenstein points out, the only option we have is, to cooperate and to forgive and to start seeing the planet as something sacred that we have to protect. And these are kind of forcing us in a direction of sort of collective evolution. We've got to change the way things have been and find something new.
Yeah, this thing about collective evolution, right? Makes me feel like, reminds me of the word politics, and the importance that politics plays in our social reality today, and how the political and the spiritual is a message I got from the book, can be a complete force when not viewed as separate, right? Viewed as separate.
Right.
So like a sacred politics and like political romanticism. It's a term that's often used, but I'm thinking of that right now. And connecting that to the story of India, China, and Tibet comes to mind considering the current political tensions between these nations, right? And all three countries have deep Buddhist spiritual culture and philosophy as a guiding principle, yet they're locked in this sort of, tension and hatred and conflict, almost seems perpetually. So what are your personal feelings about this, the role that politics plays, would play, especially for this region?
I think the story is about the Tibetan people experiencing the oppression of an autocratic system coming in and taking over, and that reflects very much where we are now. And so we live in a kind of a harsh dualistic consciousness in our world. It just pervades everything worldwide. It's us versus them. It's and then politics and spirituality are seen as opposites. So we have the worldly politics, and then there's the otherworldly spirituality, which just sort of feeds the separation that we all experience. I've lived in China and I've lived in India, and what you say about having a common Buddhist sort of worldview is there. And I've been interested in Hinduism and Taoism as well as Buddhism. Tibet is caught in between these two forces, and India is beginning to wake up to, okay, well, maybe China's going to start crowding in on us, which they seem to be doing already in Nepal. If they dominate Nepal economically, and then it's going to be politically and in all kinds of other ways as well, then you're right on India's doorstep. So, what I was, the next phase, is like a spiritual, the next stage of, so I think the next phase of human evolution is to develop an enlightened society, the spiritualization of society somehow. Enlightened, by enlightened, I don't mean, like the Western idea of enlightenment, which is rational and intellectual in the development of knowledge and about the world and organizing the world that way. I'm talking about, developing wisdom and compassion, which is the Buddhist principle. In the book, I talk about the golden way. Can I read a passage?
Yes.
That sort of explains that. So what's happened just prior to this part I'm going to read is that the general who's in charge of the area, the communist leader of the area, has just threatened the people at a mass gathering of the people by saying either you choose the red road or the black road. And this is actually something that actually did happen, recorded by a number of people. The red road, of course, is following the path of communism, and the black road would be resistance. And with resistance means that we're going to come in and wipe you out. So what Chuang does here is to say, he interrupts the general and steps forward and addresses everybody. And he says, the golden way alone leads to a better world, a world of goodness for everyone. Let's start a new story that puts to rest the tired old patterns of power and control based on fear. Let us base life on equality, inclusion, love, and wisdom. What we need is a story that allows each of us to live to our true potential, that allows each community to make its own decisions about what they will produce, how they will live, and how they will choose to benefit communities nearby. This is what we mean by an enlightened society. This is true civilization. It is based on understanding that a life well lived is founded on basic goodness and love. So in the situation between India and China, we have two opposing worldviews, communism versus democracy, are two of the main kind of mindsets that govern the world right now. And they're two kind of immovable forces. They're pitted against each other. Only by introducing a third force can that situation be changed. And this is what Gandhi did, basically. You had riots in India against the British, and you had the British responding to the riots by, oppression of various kinds. So what Gandhi introduced was a nonviolent approach, and that worked. So what happens in the book too is the same sort of thing. You have the people who are willing to rise up in riots and fighting against the Chinese occupiers. And then you have the heavy hand of the occupiers putting that down. So what Chuang and Dechen introduce is a third way, which is to prove to the Chinese that they can use their traditional means of agriculture, their traditional philosophy and way of life, and outdo what the Chinese want them to do in terms of economic reform. But of course, they don't accept that. So, and of course, the Dalai Lama himself today, it offers a Buddhist path of wisdom and compassion.
Yeah, it's almost like finding the middle way between tradition and modernity, right? I feel like that striking that balance is key. I guess especially with cultures which have deep roots and yet are looking forward. But you mentioned Chuang and Dechen, and even with, like, discussing any story, like characters, people become such a central part because it's really people who drive the change. And it seems to me while reading that almost every man can be or has to be a Chuang and every woman a Dechen. Is it possible, for like, and I'm thinking on a mass scale of the masses, is such a kind of awakening possible among the masses?
Well, yeah. I mean, Chuang and Dechen are archetypes. Yeah. And they represent sacred marriage, the union of, Shiv Shakti, yin yang, masculine, feminine principles cooperating with each other. So it's intellectual rationality combined with compassionate action. And so this is possible when we discover and live up to our own individual potential. Whether that can happen on a mass scale, this depends on, a spiritual education, I think. Not necessarily a religious education, but a spiritual awakening, which is, I think, desperately needed at this point in our, in our human development, our awakening to be able to meet the challenges of the time. So I think every woman and every man should, think in terms of trying to achieve that.
Yeah. Often when I think about these things, and it's sort of connected to my next question, is that even in like a country like India, just spelling out these ideas in each language so that, such a vast multi sort of diversity of people can grasp them is also such a challenge, right? Because well, it sounds pretty and perfect, but if I cannot tell it to someone, and I often have this problem in my personal life, a lot of my relatives don't speak English at the same level as I do. So I'm often like, okay, I need to first translate this idea that I have and then communicate it to them. So I feel like that's one a definite challenge. But uh, nevertheless, just the idea of building a country or building a civilization, right? I read a tweet one that the other day. It said that that's like the best startup idea today is to build your country, because most countries are really breaking down or breaking apart in some way or the other. On a personal level, for those who are encouraged to sort of take this path, so to speak, what are some of the where does one begin as an individual? Where does one begin to think or act upon these ideas, or pursue this path on a very tangible level?
Yeah, I think it has to begin locally. You have to get to know your neighbors where you live, and come to help educate them, help broaden their horizons, begin cooperating with them, in all kinds of ways. So, and then you can start working on the larger community, your city government, or your, then, it just kind of start rebuilding from where you are. And if little communities like that happen, begin to happen, then the idea could evolve fairly quickly. But you've got to start educating your own family, inspiring people to change, example yourself, and as I said somewhere in the book, you have to. Where was that? Yeah, can I read another one? Another passage?
Yes, sure.
This one is with Chuang and Dechen. They, I think it's self-explanatory. Okay. Dechen, I've written the book in the first person from Chuang's point of view. So it's what he's thinking or telling in the story. Chuang accompanied me down the mountainside to begin our work. She would teach mindfulness and help me build awareness of the full economic, political, and spiritual scope of our new cooperative. We walked Chestnut and Little White, their horses, down the trail, which was too steep for us to ride. Partway down, we stopped at a bluff that offered a good view of the township. Dechen raised her arms across the valley as if it was a blessing. I tried to do the same, but a wave of timidity swept through me. The immensity of what we were about to attempt overwhelmed me. Creating a cooperative among these people who were headstrong and independent was by far the easiest of the tasks ahead of us. Setting them on fire and creating an enlightened society was truly the more monumental task. Don't give in to doubts, Dechen admonished suddenly. I knew she could always read me. Suddenly, surrender. Let the fire flow through you. So that example of the male and female working together to accomplish the enlightened society, and supporting one another in doing the task.
It's interesting that you bring up the male and woman working together, because another social reality which I think is a big hindrance to this kind of compassion, is the institution of patriarchy or the system of patriarchy
Right.
so deeply entrenched. At least in India, I'm not as aware of its persistence in China or Tibet, but at least in India, it's so deeply entrenched. And so I think in recent years, it's taken such a toxic turn as, feminism and the idea of equality has also taken root in public consciousness. What is the role of women, in this cooperative community building that we read about? And B, in your own personal experience living in India, have you have you found how to deal with the resistance that patriarchy just eventually, naturally poses when it's challenged?
Yeah, well, we're seeing the dying days of patriarchy now, I think. I hope, with and the reaction to any of the changes that we'd like to see. Yeah, I mean, it's digging in and trying to hang on, is, like with their nails going down the chalkboard or something. But yeah, I put a lot of strong women in the book, and the reason I did that is to point out that without the wisdom and the ability of women to work together with others, we can't move forward. Women are naturally cooperative, whereas men are naturally competitive. And women who are competitive learn that from male roles, basically. We have too many women in the world who, wear trousers and, business suits and emulate men rather than being, feminine. So we need the characteristics of women, wise women, to pull this evolution off. Because patriarchy has been going on for 5,000 years and it's only led to division. And let's hope that we can return to the patriotistic times where there was more, it seemed to be there was more equality between the sexes, there was more equality among all people, and much more cooperation. And so if we can return to that kind of thinking, that kind of living, then we can start treating the world the way it should be and treating each other the way we should.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that can happen. Also, in just thinking about like taking what's valuable from the past to move forward, right? I feel a lot of these discussions get misinterpreted as going back to the past.
Yeah.
Put India before we were, conquered by one dynasty and then another colonizer. But I like what you said about taking what's of value and using that to move forward instead of sort of focusing too much on what's going wrong and why, and a lot of that. Speaking about the masculine and the feminine, and I can't help but think about the gender spectrum, the non-conformity spectrum that we're now, beginning to talk about and introspect. So where do you think this feminine masculine idea, or like how would you translate these ideas of cooperation in a discussion of where gender roles aren't as conforming? If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's a spectrum. I mean, each of us have, even if you're a man, you have feminine characteristics, and so it's a spectrum, I think, of what manifests.
That's simply put. It's just what it is. I like that. I like that. There's no explaining. Wow. I would encourage everybody to read this book. It is it make you reflect on your life. It will make you pause and, you know, not just mindlessly just go from one task to another and one day to another, but really the way I'm seeing it is like, you know, it helps you design your life in the way that you see it fit. And I love that. And I love how the emotions and these ideas that it evokes in me. I do want to ask you on a last note, this is something I do with everybody. If there are book recommendations, you know, for people interested in beginning to explore spirituality or communism or any, you know, any of these themes of world building or civilization building, would you have some starter pack of books to recommend?
Yeah, I mean, another book by Charles Eisenstein. I'm not sure if that quote came from this book or not, but he wrote a book called The More Beautiful World We Know Is Possible. So he outlines some of the ideas that I've been talking about. And then some other books that relate to what I've written are the Warrior Song of King Gesar, which were written by Douglas Pennock. And I got a lot of my paraphrasing from this in the book that I wrote with Douglas's permission. And then, of course, there's the Dalai Lama's own autobiography. It's very good to read about that topic. And for some philosophical background, Shambhala, the Sacred Path of the Warrior, which relates to Windhorse Warriors, of course, by Chogyam Trungpa.
Yes.
And yeah, there's lots of books. Any books written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama would be good on philosophy. Any of Charles Eisenstein's books on we're going as a civilization are good. He wrote a book called Sacred Economics. So yeah, a lot of that kind of thing.
That's a lot of lovely recommendations. I'm going to use my college library to get a hold on some of these. Are you working on anything currently? Any fiction, nonfiction, any book?
Yes, I have another novel on the way, I hope.
Oh, wow. When can we expect it? And can you give us a little bit of an outline or a detail of what it could be like?
Yeah, it's going on with the idea of sacred marriage. Ooh. And it's a spiritual journey to Mount Kailash. So this is, like the Tibet element is in there again. But the two people I'm writing about one is, the woman is Native American, and the man is Ladakhi, Tibetan from Ladakh.
Ooh.
And they meet in a back alley in Delhi.
Wow, truly,
I realize they both
have all geographies for the US, India, and Tibet, all the geographies you're associated with.
Yeah, and they realize they both have a dream of going to Mount Kailash, so they make it happen.
Wow, that sounds intriguing. Any expected dates?
I don't know. Maybe another year.
Oh, okay.
Maybe sooner.
Well, yes, I look forward to it. Thank you, Rishi, so much for joining me today. To everybody who's watching this, read The Windhorse Warrior. It's by Yogi Books. I'm sure you'll find a link somewhere on the caption. And that's the beautiful cover. I love the cover. I loved it. It is, yeah. It's
that cover is nice too.
Yeah. Oh, I only had the front one. Oh, wow. Yes, as you can see, a book that looks also not to belittle just how awesome it is, but it also looks really nice on your shelf. So Yes, read it and let us know what you think about it. And thank you again, Rishi.
Thank you.